Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Zayin, Daf 7 of Masechta Beitzah. Friends, we got a big one over here. Daf Zayin. Beitzah is Beitzah is some Masechta, huh? Yeah, it's not a quick one. We gotta work through it, which is nice, you know. It's very nice. It's part of the experience over here. Some things go faster, some things go slower. Like an egg. I guess like a hard-boiled egg, you gotta cook it all the way through the maisis. So we gotta really work through and massage Masechta Beitzah so that we understand it properly. I guess. Let's go weiter. So friends, what does Daf Zayin talk about? So at the beginning of the Daf, we continue a shtickle talking about different nafkaminas when it comes to eggs and selling eggs. The last thing that we said yesterday was that a egg, once it's laid, it becomes complete, and we said that the difference is, well, at this point it has the ability to turn into a chick, which is masha enkein, which is not the case if you sort of slaughter a chicken and find fully developed eggs inside of it. They won't be able, they still will be unable to form into chicks. So we start off with a few nafkaminas when it comes to, so we said the nafkamina was for mekach or memkor. If you buy an egg and you wanted it to raise chicks, and it'll be a mekach to, so you can get a refund. So we talk a little bit about refunds at the beginning. Then we have a few different other opinions about what exactly does it mean for the egg to be complete once it comes out into the world. Then we talk about some other nafkaminas about if you find eggs to try to figure out if it's born on Yom Tif or not. Okay. Then we go weiter in our Mishnah when we talked about the nafkamina between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding hametz and leaven, like sourdough starter and stuff like that. So we explore that, and then we move on in our Mishnah as well to the part about kissui hadam, when you slaughter an animal and then you have to cover the blood. So those are kind of the sugyas of Daf Zayin and Masechta Beitzah. Friends, let's jump in. Make sure you had a few cups of coffee, and let us jump in. So all the way at the bottom of Davav Amud Beis, Kiauda Amaduhu Bei'e, and now we are at the top of Zayin Amud Aleph. Defachya Liman Yuavule Bei Deshchuta also the Kamid Bami Amalu Mekachtaus Hu V'Hader. Friends, what does this mean? So as I mentioned a minute ago, the last thing that we had discussed yesterday was that an egg, once it is laid, it now is complete. And the kasha is, what does it mean that now it is complete? So we said, well, now that it's complete, it can, once it comes out into the world, so it has the ability to develop into a chick. But if you slaughter a chicken and find inside of it eggs, so those eggs will be unable to develop into a chick. And we said, what's the difference? Well, for purchasing. If a fellow is looking to purchase eggs so that he can raise them into chicks, and then he's sold an egg that came from a slaughtered chicken, which will be unable to develop into chicks, so he can get his money back. Okay? So, Kiauda Amalu, like a real life story, that a fellow said to the chicken merchants, Bei defachya leman, who's got my bei defachya? Who's got for me eggs that came from a live chicken as opposed to a slaughtered chicken, right? That they didn't slaughter the chicken and find the eggs inside. Yavulei bei deshchuta, and sure enough, classic, probably happened in you saw somewhere, what's the difference? Take these, right? So they gave him eggs that came from a slaughtered chicken and were incapable of becoming what's it called? Chicks. Also the Chamid Bami. So the case came before Bami because the fellow now wants his money back. Amulu mekachtosu v'hader. Bami says, look, it's a mekachtos. It's a purchase, a transaction that happened out of miscommunication, out of misunderstanding, out of mistake. He thought that he was buying chickens from a live chicken, eggs from a live chicken. You sold him eggs from a dead chicken. It's not. It's not what he expected to be buying. So therefore, he can get his money back. Pshita. In fact, the Gemara, obviously, it's a mekach tos. He thought he was buying bei defachya, and they sold him bei deshchuta. He explicitly asked for bei defachya, and they sold him the opposite. So the Gemara says, why? Maybe I have meaning to say that we can assume that really he just wanted to eat them. He just wanted to eat them. He didn't specify that he wanted to raise chicks. I may have thought to say, look, this fellow, he asked for eggs from a live chicken, but Lemaisa, all he wants to do is just eat it. And the reason why he said that he wants eggs from a live chicken is just because they are fully developed, and he wanted to eat fully developed eggs. And therefore I may have thought that since he just wanted to eat them anyways, and he just wanted fully developed eggs, so maybe then it wouldn't be considered a mekach tos. Maybe then he wouldn't be able to get his money back. So the Gemara says, what's the difference? What's the difference if he wants the eggs to eat, or if he wants the eggs to raise chicks? So the meiz valei bene, well, I may have thought to say that, well, if he just wanted to eat the eggs, and I guess that eggs from a live chicken are tastier than eggs from a dead chicken, I guess. So then maybe I would think, well, he wanted the eggs from the live chicken, they gave him the eggs from the dead chicken, so then maybe he just has to pay, they just have to refund him the difference between the quality of the dead chicken eggs versus the live chicken eggs. So maybe they just refund the difference. Kamash Milan. So therefore, Reb Ami is saying that no, we don't say that by default he wants to eat them and he only gets refunded the difference. We say that if a fellow says that he wants chicken from a eggs from a live chicken, so then we can assume that it's because he wants to raise the chicks, and therefore eggs from a dead chicken are unable to grow into chicks, and therefore it's a complete mess up, and he gets his money back, right? So therefore, by default, if a fellow says, I want eggs from a live chicken, we can assume that it's because he wants to raise chicks, and if you give him eggs from a dead chicken, it's a mekach tos, it's a complete, false transaction, and he gets his money back. A fellow went to the market and he says, people, who has fertilized eggs? Because fertilized eggs can grow into chicks, right? So he says, who has fertilized eggs? And they gave him unfertilized eggs that are unable to grow into chicks. Also, so again, the case came before Abami. He says, okay, it's a mekach tos. It was a false purchase. He thought he was buying fertilized eggs. You sold him unfertilized eggs. So v'hadar, and therefore he needs to get his money back. Pshita, this is obvious. Of course it's a mekach tos. He thought he was getting fertilized eggs. They gave him non-fertilized eggs. So, well, I may have hadam minute to say that we can assume that all he really wants to do is eat these eggs anyways. And what's the difference between fertilized eggs versus non-fertilized eggs? Fertilized eggs are richer, they're more gewaldig, more geschmack. And therefore, I may have thought he just wanted them to eat it anyways. Who cares what his intention was? Who cares if he wants to eat it or if he wants to grow chicks out of it? The fact of the matter is, he wanted fertilized eggs. He gave him non-fertilized eggs. Well, the nafkamina is, if he only wants it for eating, so then they would only have to refund the difference between the value of the fertilized eggs versus the non-fertilized eggs. Kamash Milan, that by default, if a fellow says that he wants fertilized eggs, you can assume it's because he wants to raise chicks, and if you give him unfertilized eggs, so then he can't raise chicks out of that, and he gets a complete refund. Friends, going back to our original question, we had this, says Rav Huna in the name of Rav, that eggs, once they come out of the chicken, now they are complete. The question was, what does it mean that they're complete? So the answer that we gave just now, that we've been working with, is that they can grow into chicks. And because they can grow into chicks, it's an nafkamina for transactions. There's another way to understand it. By saying, if you want, I will say, nigmira. What does it mean that when it comes out into the world, it's complete? Imitzias ruba nigmira. What it means is that when a majority of the egg already comes out of the chicken, so then it's already considered like it comes out. And that's the chiddush. What it's saying is that once a majority of the chicken comes out of I don't know what I'm talking about, but if the majority of the egg comes out of the chicken, it's already considered laid, and even if it goes back into the chicken, it's already considered like it was laid. And of course, the nafkamina is that if the majority of the egg is laid before Yom Tif, and then it comes back into the chicken, and then that night on Yom Tif, the chicken actually laid the egg completely. So we're saying that, well, since the majority of the egg was already laid before Yom Tif, it's considered like an egg that was laid before Yom Tif, and you can consume it on Yom Tif. Like Rabbi Yochanan, if you have epis an egg, that the majority of the egg was laid before Yom Tif begins, and went back into the chicken, you're allowed to eat it on Yom Tif, since it was most of it already had come out of the chicken before Yom Tif. Even though it went back in, it's already considered like it was laid. There are those who say, finally, what does it mean that when it comes out, it is complete? Davka, the opposite. Imitzias kula nigmara. Imitzias kula in avaruba lo. That davka, no, it needs to entirely be laid before Yom Tiv in order for you to be able to eat it on Yom Tiv. If a majority of the egg went out and then went back in, it is not considered laid. Only once it's completely laid, imitziasa, when it comes out of the chicken entirely, then it's considered laid. If a majority of the chicken of the egg was laid before Yom Tov, but then went back inside, he got cold feet and jumped back in, so then it wouldn't count. To exclude Rabbi Yochanan, that this is Rav Huna, the name of Rav, who says that that when it comes out entirely from the chicken, it is complete. But a majority would not be considered complete, considered like it's laid, and that argues with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that once a majority of the egg leaves the chicken, it's considered laid. Rav is arguing according to this understanding and saying, no, it has to be entirely laid to be considered laid. Friends, let's move on. Gufa, we said earlier, Hashoichet Satarnigolis, a fellow slaughters a chicken. Okay, sounds like fun. Umatzba Beitzah Gemuris, and Itaka finds inside the chicken eggs, whole eggs. Mutaris La'ochlam B'chalav, you're allowed to eat those eggs with milk. Okay, they're not considered like meat. They're not considered part of the chicken. The chicken would be considered meat. At least midrabanan, whatever it is. The chicken would be considered meat, and you would not be allowed to eat it with milk. But once, if you slaughter the chicken and find in it complete eggs, whole eggs, so then it wouldn't be considered meat anymore. They would be considered eggs, and you can eat them with milk. Rabbi Yankiv Omer says, Rabbi Yaakov, if they were attached to connective tissue, asuris, then they're still considered to be like meat, and you cannot eat them with milk. Okay, that sounds like, what do you guys think? Sounds fun, right? Mantana Ladutanu Rabbanan. Who is the author of the following Beitzah? Friends, you ready? Ha'ochel minivlas of tahor. A fellow who eats from the carcass, the unslaughtered carcass, meaning unshechted carcass, it's dead, so I guess all carcasses mistam are dead. A carcass of an unslaughtered, right? When I say unslaughtered, I mean like kosher shchita. So a fellow who eats from an unslaughtered carcass of a bird. Now, what's unique about an unslaughtered carcass of a bird is that it is not tameh. Right? We know, we've learned a number of times about nevela. Right? If you touch a dead animal, so then you become tameh. And nevela is a avatuma. It can be metame people. However, a nevela of a bird is not metame b'mago v'masa. If you touch it, if you carry it, it does not make you tameh. But what's interesting about the carcass of a unslaughtered bird is that if you eat a kissui of it, then, right, it's metame bebeis habliya, when you swallow it, when you eat it, when you swallow a kissui of it, then lemaise, you become tameh and your clothing becomes tameh as well. That's what's unique about what's called nivlas of tahor, the carcass of a pure bird. So now, ha'ochel minivlas of tahor, a fellow eats from the carcass of a pure bird, min hashalol shal beitzim. So what are the parts that if you eat it, you're going to become tamei and your clothes become tamei. So min hashalosh shel beitzim. So if you eat from a cluster of eggs, okay, fine. Wait, but that was like a cluster. Means like a cluster of eggs that are still connected to the connective tissue. Okay. So mina atzomis. So if you eat the bones, umina gidin, or if you eat the sinews, umina basur shenidlash mina chai, or if there was like some flesh that just got detached from a live chicken, yuck, or some kind of live bird, tahor. In all those cases, you would be tahor. It would not be an issue of nivlas of tahor, which would make you tamei. But these things, bones, sinews, these eggs that are still attached to connective tissue, if you eat those things, you are tahor. It's not as if you ate the meat of a nivlas of tahor, which would make you tamei. However, mina eshkol shel beitzim, but from the ovaries, if you eat the ovaries, mina kurkivan, or if you eat the crop, I don't know, crop is like some kind of like inner, like organs, intestines kind of stuff, uvnei me'ayin, and intestines. Or if you take the fat of the bird and you melt it down and drink it. Yeah, let's move on before I get sick. Ugmo, and you gulped it down. Tamei, then you are tamei in all of these cases. Right? So, alright, sounds like fun. Montana, okay, so, friends, one of the things that we listed in this Beitzah is that if you eat the eggs that are still attached to the connective tissue, so we said that you are tahor. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. We say that you're tahor. Meaning, friends, if you eat the carcass of a of tahor, of a pure bird, we say that you become tamei and your clothing becomes tamei. Now, we're trying to dig deeper and say, okay, well, which parts of the bird does it apply to? We're saying it does not apply to eggs that are still connected to the connective tissue, implying that they're not considered meat. If they were like regular meat of the bird, so then you would be tamei if you eat nivlas of tahor. We're saying that if you eat these eggs that are still attached to the connective tissue, so then we're saying that you are tahor, you remain pure, which means that it's clearly not just regular meat. Ho ho. Now we had said a few minutes ago that according to Rabbi Yaakov, if you slaughter a chicken and you find inside eggs, but the eggs are still connected to connective tissue, they're considered like meat and you're not allowed to eat it with milk. It's still considered meat. So therefore I would say that according to Rabbi Yaakov, if these eggs that are still connected to the connective tissue are still considered meat, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it with milk, so mistama then, if it's a nivlas of tahor, if it's just the carcass of an unslaughtered of tahor, and there are eggs that are still connected to connective tissue, it should be considered part of the meat, and therefore I should be tamei if I eat them. Yet this Beitzah is saying that you're tahor if you eat it. So it says, so Montana min hashalo shel beitzim tahor. So who is the Tana who says that if you eat these eggs that are still connected to the connective tissue, you are tahor? So Rav Yosef Dilok Rabbi Yaakov. So it says Rav Yosef, well clearly I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Rabbi Yaakov. Dik Rabbi Yaakov, ha'amrim ha'yumu'uris begidin asuris. Because Rabbi Yaakov says that if the eggs are still connected to connective tissue, you're not allowed to eat it with milk. I.e., it's still considered meat. And if it's still considered meat, then it should be metame, the base of It should make you tamei. Yet this Beitzah is saying that you're still tahor if you eat these eggs that are connected to connective tissue. So says Rav Yosef, clearly this Beitzah is not Rabbi Yaakov. Amalei Abaye. But Abaye replies to his Rebbe Rav Yosef. And he says, Mimai, why are you so convinced that this Beitzah is not Rabbi Yaakov? Dilma adkan lo ka'am Rabbi Yaakov hasam. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Yaakov says that when it comes to meat and milk, these eggs that are still connected to connective tissue, you're not allowed to eat with milk. They're still considered meat. That's by Isur V'Heter. By Isur V'Heter, if something's mutter or asur, are you allowed to eat these eggs with milk or not? Asur. These eggs are still considered, they're connected to the connective tissue. They're considered meat. Asur, you're not allowed to eat it with milk. Avo. But, suggests Abai, linyan tuma, in terms of tuma, and let me just add one more important point there. Meaning Abaye is saying that maybe what Rabbi Yaakov is saying is that mida oraise, these eggs that are still attached to connective tissue would be considered separate. They would be considered regular eggs, and you would be allowed to eat them with milk. However, maybe what Rabbi Yaakov is saying is that midirabanan, the rabbis say, look, we want to be stringent when it comes to Isser V'Heter, and we're saying don't eat these eggs that are still attached to connective tissue. Do not eat them with milk because we're concerned that, maybe it's too similar to meat. But midoraisa, these eggs that are, fully formed but still connected to connective tissue would be considered regular eggs, and midoraisa, you would be allowed to eat them with milk. But when it comes to Isser V'Heter, is it mutter or osur to eat them with milk? We say, be stringent, osur. You're not allowed to eat these eggs that are fully formed but still connected to connective tissue. You may not eat them with milk. However, suggests Abaye, when it comes to tumah v'tayre, such as if I have the carcass of an unslaughtered bird, and now there are these eggs that are fully formed but they're still connected to connective tissue, and we're saying, if I eat them, will I be tameh? The answer is no. I won't be tameh because they are not connected, because they're fully formed. So therefore, they're considered like eggs, and therefore I will not be tameh. I will remain tahor. Right? So Abaye is suggesting that maybe these fully formed eggs, right, and maybe this Beitzah could be Rabbi Yaakov, right? So maybe Abaye is suggesting that these fully formed eggs are considered eggs. They're not considered part of the meat of the bird anymore. Just that, when it comes to Isser V'Heter of eating meat and milk, we say, look, be stringent. Don't eat these eggs with milk. That's what Rabbi Yaakov is saying. But maybe when it comes to Nivlas of Tahor, which is not an issue of Isser V'Heter, but it's a question of Tumah and Tahara, if I eat these eggs, will I be Tameh? The answer is no. Because Mida Oraisa, because technically speaking, they are already considered eggs. They're not considered part of the meat of the bird anymore. Right? So again, Omer le Abaye says to Rav Yosef Mimai, why are you so sure that this Beitzah is not Rabbi Yaakov? Duma adkan lo ka'am Rabbi Yaakov hasum. Maybe Rabbi Yaakov says that, do not eat these eggs with milk. El inyan isura. That's only by Isser V'Heter. We're saying that even though mida oraisa, these eggs are fully formed and they're no longer considered the meat of the bird. However, when it comes to eating them with milk, we say, we don't want you to eat them with milk. We want to be stringent, midrabanan. Aval le'inyan tuma, lo. But when it comes to tumah v'tara, and we say, look, if you eat these eggs that are fully formed, but are still attached to the connective tissue, if I eat these from a nivlas of tahor, will I be tameh? The answer is no, because midoraisa, they're just considered like regular eggs. V'chitem le'inyan tuma nami, nigzor. And if you can say, well, why don't we say that just like when it comes to eating them with milk, we say, well, let's be stringent and treat it like meat and say you're not allowed to eat it with milk. So why don't we say the same thing by tumah? Let's be stringent and say that it's like considered like the meat of the bird, and therefore it will make you tameh. Afushe tumah, well, because that would be sort of increasing tumah. Afushe tumah midrabanan lo mafshinon, and we don't, ideally we don't just add tumah midrabanan, because it could end up coming back to bite you. Because if you say that more and more things are tameh, well then what will happen is that when it comes to let's say kodshim, you have tyrus, which you're now going to say are tameh because of some kind of din derabanan, and now you're going to not end up eating kodshim, or maybe this thing that somebody might then be mitame kodshim, whatever it is. You don't want to be making random, just too lenient when it comes to too free when it comes to saying, oh, things are tameh, because it can come back to end up making tyrus tameh when they're really not, and then you might end up burning truma for no reason, or things like that. So that is what Abaye suggests. So Abaye suggests that maybe the author of this Beitzah could in fact be Rabbi Yaakov. And there's a difference between Isser V'Heter and Tumah and Tahara. That by Isser V'Heter we're stringent and we say don't eat these eggs with milk, but the fact of the matter is they're already fully developed eggs, and therefore they will not be metame you when it comes to nivlas of tahor. Vika da'amri, there are those who say, Mantana mina eshkol shel beitzim tamar. tamei. There are those who say that we're not talking about the shalosh shel beitzim, which was these eggs that are connected to connective tissue. Rather, Rav Yosef was commenting on the fact that the Beitzah also says that if you eat the ovaries of this bird, so you are going to be tamei. If you eat the ovaries of this bird, you are going to be tamei, we said. So, who is this Tana who says that? Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yaakovi. The Amar Ma'urus Begidin Asuris. So says Rav Yosef. So the author of this Beitzah Dafka must be Rabbi Yaakov, because Rav Yosef is understanding this Eshkol Shel Beitzim not to be referring to the ovaries of the bird, but rather to that which is attached to the ovaries of the bird, i.e. the eggs. So therefore, Rav Yosef wants to understand it, right? So in that Beitzah, there were two things that we mentioned. We mentioned the Shlal Shel Beitzim, then we mentioned the Eshkol Shel Beitzim. So the first part we focused on the Shlal Shel Beitzim, which we said was referring to these fully developed eggs, which are still like attached to the tissue. Fine. Now we're referring to the Eshkol Shel Beitzim. So generally, we refer to them as the ovaries, but Rav Yosef was assuming that the Eshkol Shel Beitzim is referring to eggs that are connected to the ovaries, and therefore. What Rav Yosef is saying, well, interesting. We're saying that if you eat these eggs that are connected to the ovaries, so then you're going to be tamei, l'maaseh. You're going to be tamei. So that must mean that it's considered meat. It's considered part of the bird. Who is the one who says that these eggs are considered part of the bird when they're still connected? Rabbi Yaakov. So therefore, says Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yaakov, this Beitzah must be Rabbi Yaakov. The Amrim, Hayu Ma'urus Begidin Asuris, who says that if these eggs are still connected to the connective tissue of the bird, the taka asuris, you can't eat them with milk because they're considered like meat. To which Abaye responds to Rav Yosef, he says, wait a second, but who says that you're understanding Eshkol Shel Beitzim correct? How do you know that it means that when it says the cluster, it means to that which is connected to the cluster, that which is connected to the ovaries of the bird, which is the eggs? Dilma Eshkol Gufe, maybe it means the ovaries themselves, in which case it's just regular meat. And that's why it's matame, nothing to do with eggs that are connected to the tissue. And if you're going to say, well, then what's the chiddush about the ovaries? It's just part of the bird, and memele, if you eat it and it's a nivlas of tahor, you're going to be tamei. So says Abaye, well, because the chiddush of the ovaries is the same chiddush as the crop and the intestines. That even though, yes, they are meat, since there are some people who don't eat the intestines of birds, so we had to let you know that, well, if you do eat the intestines of the birds, you're going to be tamei. So here also by the ovaries, since there are people who don't eat bird ovaries, so we had to teach that if you eat them, you are going to, from a nivlas of tahor, you are going to be tamei, and therefore says Abaye, this Eshkol Shel Beitzim is just really a reference to the ovaries, and that is why you are tamei, but there's no nafkamina in terms of Rabbi Yaakov, because Rabbi Yaakov is talking about eggs, not the ovaries themselves. Okay? Fun times. Let's go weiter. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, any creature that mates during the day, like that always mates during the day, so these creatures will always give birth during the day. Any creature that always mates at night will always give birth at night. Any creature that mates during the day and during the night, nolad ben bayom ben balayla, can also give birth whether during the day or whether during the night. So what's an example? What is something that mates specifically during the day and also gives birth specifically during the day? That is a chicken. A chicken always mates during the day and always lays its eggs during the day. Zo atolef. Something that always mates at night and always gives birth at night, that is a bat. And a creature that mates during the day and during the night and can give birth during the day or during the night, humans and those who are similar. What are things that are similar? I don't know, mammals? What do you guys think? Omer Mai, we said, so we just said that something that exclusively mates during the day and therefore exclusively lays eggs, in this case during the day, we're specifically talking about a chicken. We say, okay, that sounds like nice fun facts for Jeopardy, but we're not Jeopardy people. The Gemara was pre-Jeopardy, before Jeopardy. And L'maiseh, we don't care about Jeopardy, we care about Yontif. So what's the nafkamina for Yontif? Lichter Rav Mari, Breder of Kahana, Tom Rav Mari, Breder of Kahana, Bodak Bekina Shatanagol Me'erev Yontif. Says Rav Mari in the name, Breder of Kahana, that if a fellow checks the chicken nest on Erev Yom Tov, mamash right before Yom Tov starts, he runs out to see if there's any eggs that they could chap arayin for Yom Tov. V'lo matza babeya. Nothing, garnished. There's no eggs there. No eggs. U'lemocher hishkim. And the next morning, he wakes up very early, before even the sun comes out. It's still nighttime. U'matza babeya. And sure enough, there's an egg. And his head explodes. He says, this is crazy. My mom is checked right before Yontif. No eggs. Now, chickens don't lay eggs at night. And all of a sudden now it's still nighttime. The sun hasn't come up yet. And there's an egg. He says, I don't understand. There was no egg before Yom Tif, and now there's an egg, but chickens don't lay eggs at night. Muteres, so you can eat the egg. Because, again, since it's a fact that chickens don't lay eggs at night, so mimele, when was this egg laid? During the day. But I checked. Well, clearly you didn't check well enough. V'alei badak, but he checked. Emelo badak yafe yafe. Well, clearly not well enough. V'afilu badak yafe, emer yatsu saruba v'chazra avay. And to the extent that even if he checked really well, he mamish turned over the whole, everything, every nook and cranny looking for an egg, nothing. Well, if that's the case, then we'll assume like Rabbi Yochanan, that as we said earlier, according to Rabbi Yochanan, an egg that came out of the chicken, a majority, and then went back into the chicken, is already considered like it's complete, it's considered like it's laid, and therefore even if it went back into the chicken and then it lays it that night, because if it goes back to the chicken, it can lay it that night, so then it's considered like it was laid before Yom Tov. So in a situation, says Ramari Breder of Kana, in a situation where a person checked the nest right before Yom Tov starts, no eggs, and then that night, essentially, he finds an egg, right? At the end of the night, he finds an egg. So you can assume that it was laid before Yom Tov, and even if you checked really well, you can assume that, okay, well, because we know that chickens don't lay eggs at night, so then Memele, what must have happened was that it came out a majority of the way, then went back inside, but at that point it's like Rabbi Yochanan, that it's already considered laid from before Yom Tov, Uchd Rabbi Yochanan. Ini, is this really so? Ve'omer Rav Yosef ben Shaul, Omer Rebbe, Badak b'kana shel tarnagoles me'erev Yom Tov, if a fellow checks the nest before Yom Tov, v'lo matza babeya, and he doesn't find an egg, u'lemacher ishkim u'matza b'Beitzah, and then he wakes up the next morning before it's light out, and he taka finds an egg. So the question is, what's going on? When was this egg laid? Asura! You're not allowed to eat the egg. You're not allowed to eat the egg, because it was laid at night on Yom Tov. So one second, so Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul is saying in the name of Rebbe that that chickens can lay eggs at night. And if you check the nest before Yom Tif and there's no egg, and now you check the nest before, at the end of the night, and there's an egg, you're not allowed to eat it because it gave birth, because it was laid on Yom Tif at night. And for the Gemara, Hosam Desafna Me'ara. Well, that's talking about unfertilized eggs. Chickens can lay unfertilized eggs at night, but fertilized eggs would only be during the day. Well, then one second, going back to Rav Mari, Breder of Kahana's case, where the fellow checked the nest before Yom Tif, no eggs. Then he finds an egg before daylight on Yom Tif, and we say it's 1,000% an egg from the day before. Either you missed it or it came out a majority of the way and went back in. How come over there we're not saying, well, maybe it's just an unfertilized egg that was laid at night? Where am I? So, and for the Gemara, well, in Rav Mari's case, there was a rooster around. And because there's a rooster around, we can assume that it was a fertilized egg. And if it's a fertilized egg, then the mele, it's only going to be laid during the day, not at night. But even if there's a rooster around, isn't it still possible that this chicken is laying an unfertilized egg? And for Ravina, no. If there's a rooster around, any egg will be fertilized, fact. And therefore, Rav Mari's case is talking about where there's a rooster around, and because there's a rooster around, we know that this is a fertilized egg, and because it's a fertilized egg, it's impossible that it was laid at night, and therefore, if you find the egg in the nest before daylight on Yom Tif, you know for sure that it came from before Yom Tif. Either you just missed it when you checked before Yom Tif, or it went out the majority of the way and went back in which case it's already considered complete on Erev Yom Tif. But says Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul that in the event where there's no roosters around, and it's an unfertilized egg, well, that could actually be even late at night, and therefore if you checked before Yom Tov and didn't find any eggs, and then before daylight the next day you find an egg, so you can assume if there's no rooster around that it's an unfertilized egg and that was late at night. V'ad kama. And how far away, what's considered the proximity of the rooster? Right? How close by does the rooster have to be for us to be able to say any egg is memele, a fertilized egg? Amurav Gamda Mishmei Derav Kol Heicha Deshama Kale B'Yimama. So it says of Gamda in the name of Rav that as long as you'd be able to hear the rooster during the daytime, as Rashi points out, that sound doesn't travel as far during the day as it does at night, maybe because it's noisier during the day, I don't know, whatever it is. So as long as you'd be able to hear a rooster during the daytime, so that's considered close enough that you have to assume that any egg would be fertilized. Over Rav Mari Uvda at Shisin Bate, there was actually a situation where Rav Mari paskined that there was a rooster 60 houses away, and still we had to be concerned that the egg was fertilized. Now, if there is a river, however, between the hen and the rooster, well, the rooster is not going to be able to cross the river, or at least it just won't. But if there's a bridge, l'maaseh, it'll cross the bridge in order to fertilize the egg. Meitzra lo avra. Now, if there, however, was not kind of like a makeshift bridge, kind of like a log across the river with a rope that you can hold onto from on top, well, the rooster is not going to traverse such a complicated bridge. Hava uvda v'avra amitzra. And their taka was actually a case where actually the rooster did manage to get across one of these makeshift river crossings. Alright, sounds fun. So now we say 1 second. Back to Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul's case. So he says that if you check the nest before Yom Tov, no egg darting. And then you check the nest before daylight in the next day, and there is l'maisa an egg darting. So it says Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, you can assume that it was an unfertilized egg that was laid at night. An unfertilized egg that was laid at night. There was no rooster around, it was an unfertilized egg laid at night. So, Frekti Gemara, my iria badak, kilo badak nami. Frekti Gemara, 1 second. Why are we, according to Yosef ben Shaul, he says that he davka checked before Yom Tiv, and there was no egg over there. And then he finds an egg, before daylight, and we say that, okay, it was late at night. Who cares if he checked before Yom Tov or not? The fact of the matter is, he found an egg before daylight, regardless of if he checked beforehand or not, Shouldn't you have to assume that it was late at night since we're talking about an unfertilized egg? So answer the Gemara, ki lo badak ema me'esmo lavoy. Well, if he didn't check right before Yom Tiv, well then I'll say that even though we're talking about an unfertilized egg, chances are you can assume that it was laid before, during the day. Well, if that's the case, that we're saying that even unfertilized eggs are generally laid during the day, well then, even if he checked also, why don't we just come up with the same excuses like we did for the fertilized egg, which is that, well, it was definitely laid before Yom Tiv, and even if you didn't find it before Yom Tiv, well then we can assume that it's because it went out a majority of the way and then went back in. Like Rabbi Yochanan, well, we say, well, Rabbi Yochanan's, right, this case where like an egg comes out and then comes back in is not particularly common. Therefore, when it comes to a fertilized egg, where we say objectively it will never be late at night, so then the only way we can explain it is that it came out majority of the way and went back in. So that's why we explain it that way by a fertilized egg. But when it comes to an unfertilized egg, if we checked before Yom Tif and it wasn't there, so then it's more likely, right, and then you check before the daylight on the next day and there is an egg, it's more likely that it was late at night than to say that it was, left the chicken majority of the way before Yom Tiv and then went back inside, and then that's more, right, that's less probable. Rabbi Yosef and Shaul, and says Rabbi Yosef and Shaul in the name of Rebbe Amar Rebbe in an unrelated topic, that when it comes to liquefied garlic, you have to be concerned that if you leave it uncovered overnight, maybe there's snake venom in it. Okay? Alright, friends, moving on. Friends, who wants to tell me what the Mishnah had said? The Mishnah had said that Beis Shammai's opinion is that on Pesach, seor, leaven, like sourdough starter, is a problem if you have a olive's worth, a kissui. Whereas hametz, we're a little bit more lenient, you have up to the size of a date, a kosheves. Whereas Beis Hillel is stringent, and they say both chametz and leaven, the cutoff is a kissui. Let's go weiter. My tamai de Beis Shammai. How come Beis Shammai, this is the Gemara that we saw in Masechta Yoma, how come Beis Shammai says that seor is a kissui and chametz is a kikoseves, that they're separate sizes? Im kein lichtov rachmana chametz v'lo ba'is seor. So says Beis Shammai, well, the pasuk mentions both chametz and seor, both actual leaven and leavening agents. Now, if the amount for both was the same, so only mention one. Just mention chametz. Don't mention anything about starters. V'ana amina, and then I will logically extrapolate. Uma chametz she'ein chimutzo kashe b'chizayis. Well, if when it comes to chametz, like bread, that its leavening abilities is weak in that it doesn't make other things chametz, right? Sourdough starter, that's the whole point of it. It can make other things chametz. You put it in stuff, and then you get bread. It like mamish is like a bread maker. It makes chametz. So that's like pretty serious stuff. Whereas bread itself isn't going to make other bread. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about this stuff. But that's what I've read, I guess you could say. Akoponim. So, Lemaisa, I don't know that much about eggs also. Well, that's not true. I know a little bit about eggs, but mostly in the context of breakfast. Let's be honest. Mostly in the context of breakfast. Although that's also more of a recent thing, right? As we know, I didn't cook anything for a year and a half, even an egg. But now, recently, I've been making eggs. Big stuff. Let's go weiter. So, all right, we got sidetracked a little bit over there. We really need to go weiter. It's a long daf. I'm wasting your time. Everybody needs to go on with their lives. Okay, so friends. So, therefore, when it comes to chametz, which is not as potent as like sourdough starter in terms of making other things chametz. Well, if we'll say that, just tell me chametz, and if we're saying that chametz is a kazayis, well, memele starter, which is even more stringent, will be the same amount at least. Will be the same size. And it's not really going to get smaller than a kazayis. So, seor shechimutz o kasha lo koshikin, certainly leaven, which is more stringent than chametz, should be a kazayis. So, seor the cause of achman lamali. So then why did the pasuk mention seor in addition to chametz? Why did it mention both? So, lomalach shiur shel zeh, lo kishiur shel zeh. To say that, well, they're not the same amounts. That while seor is going to be an olive size, chametz is actually a little more lenient and it'll be a date size. And Beitzah argues, ma pitom. You need both of them in the pasuk. You need chametz and you need seor. One is not enough. Because of achman is seor, because if the pasuk only mentioned leaven, well, I'll say, yeah, leaven. Leaven is a problem because it makes other things chametz. But chametz, which doesn't make other things chametz, it itself is chametz, but it won't make other things chametz. Maybe not. Not what? It's unclear exactly not what, but maybe it won't be a problem at all. Maybe, I don't know. Oh, interesting. Yeah, whatever it is, not. It's like a little bit unclear about what this not is, but maybe it won't be a problem at all even. Tzricha, therefore we needed to also say chametz. Because of achmana, chametz, shum devar la'achila. And if the pasuk said chametz alone, I'll say, okay, well, chametz, you're able to eat. You can eat chametz, you can eat bread. Aval seor, she'en devar la'achila, emalo. But seor, starter, which you don't really eat starter, you put it into other things to make bread, but you don't eat starter straight. I'll say maybe that's not a problem. Tzricha, therefore we needed to teach us both chametz and leaven. But one second. Beis Shammai says that there's a different amount for chametz and for seor. But doesn't Beis Shammai hold of Reb Zera? Meaning, obviously Beis Shammai was way before Reb Zera. Way before Reb Zera. But doesn't Beis Shammai hold of the principle that Reb Zera defines, which is the Amar Reb Zera pasach hakasuv b'seor v'sim b'chametz. That says Reb Zera that the pasuk, right? What does the pasuk say? Shivas yom seor leimatziv v'atechim ki kol ocha machmetzes. That the pasuk starts out talking about seor and then changes its wording to mention machmetzes. Why not just say seor twice? Because machmetzes ultimately is seor anyways. Machmetzes is starter, is leaven. Chametz is chametz. Machmetzes is seor, is leaven. So why does the pasuk say seor and then machmetzes? Why not just say the same word twice? Lo merlach, to say to you, zeu seor, zeu chametz, to say that both seor and chametz have the same amount, have the same shiur. So why does Beis Shammai say that seor is a kazayis and chametz is a kikoseves? After all, doesn't the pasuk say seor and machmetzes to teach us that they're the same amount? So answer the Gemara le'inyan achila kuliyam lo plige. So when it comes to eating chametz or eating leaven, everyone agrees that's going to be a kazayis. No question. When it comes to eating chametz and pesach, kazayis. Ki plige, where they argue, is le'inyan bi'ur. In terms of if you find chametz or if you find leaven, do you have to burn it? That's where already there's differing opinions. Beis Shammai says that we don't learn out burning from eating, and therefore while eating, everyone agrees that the shear is a kazayis. When it comes to burning, when it comes to chametz, it's going to be a kikoseves according to Beis Shammai. Do you have to burn, right? If you find a piece of bread, do you have to burn it? Beis Shammai says if it's a date size, yes. Less than that, no. Whereas Beis Hillel say we learn out burning from eating. And just like eating, you're not allowed to eat a kazayis of chametz. Also, if you find the kazayis of chametz, you got to burn it. Itmar Nami was also stated, Amar Yosef B'Chanina, machlokas linyan beer, the machlokas is regarding to burning. Avol linyan achila deve'akol zevez avichzayis. But when it comes to eating, everyone agrees that we're talking about a kazayis over here for chametz and for seor. Tanin Amiyachi was taught also in a Beitzah, v'leirai licha seor, that you can't find v'leirai licha chametz, v'leirai licha seor, that you can't find, you shouldn't find any chametz or seor. You have to burn it. Zeh machlokas shebein Beis Shammai Uveis Hillel, this is the machlokus Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, sheBeis Shammai omrim soar b'chazayis, v'chometz b'kikoseves, Uveis Hillel omrim zev b'chazayis. That Beis Shammai says that by chometz you have to burn only a koseves, whereas Beis Hillel says that chametz and soor are the same, that it's a kizayis. Friends, moving on. So the Mishnah had said that a fellow who slaughters a undomesticated animal or a bird on Yom Tif, so it says Beis Shammai that take your spade, dig up a shtickle dirt, and do kissui hadam. Beis Hillel says don't do that, but Beis Hillel admits that if you did shech the animals, then do kissui hadam. Okay. So the Gemara wants to say that when the Mishnah says hashoichet, somebody who slaughters on Yom Tif, implies we won't recommend to you to slaughter on Yom Tif, but hashoichet, somebody who did, if somebody slaughtered an animal, a chayav or oaf on Yom Tif, okay, so then Beis Shammai says do kissui hadam. Fine. Ema seifa. But one second, if we keep reading in the Mishnah, what does it say? Beis Hillel omrim lo yishchot. Beis Hillel says no, don't slaughter. What do you mean Beis Hillel says don't slaughter? That implies that the Tanakama says that you should slaughter on Yom Tif. Like, what's going on over here? Okay, so halo kasha, no problem. Lo yishchot v'yichase ka'amar. No, what it means is that you shouldn't do kissui hadam. Meaning, the Mishnah says, so this is what I want to say for now. This is how to understand the Mishnah. Hashoichet chaya ve'ov b'yom tif, right? A fellow who b'di'eved slaughtered a undomesticated animal or a bird on Yom Tif, somebody who b'di'eved, somebody already did it. So Beis Shammai says, okay, do kissui hadam. Beis Hillel says, don't do kissui hadam. Okay, fine, that's what we're talking about. But ema seifa, but if we keep reading, umodim shem shochat sheyach b'bedek v'yichase. But one second. But if we keep reading in the Mishnah, it says, but Beis Hillel admits that if he did slaughter an undomesticated animal or a bird, that he would do kissui hadam. Implying that the Reisha is not talking about b'di'evet, it's talking about the chatchila. Because if we continue, Beis Hillel says, oh, by the way, but if he did, so then this is the halacha, implying that the beginning is not talking about b'di'evet if he already did it. It's talking about, can he do it? Do we recommend that he do it? So I'm Rabba Achi Ka'amar. So it says Rabba, this is how to understand the Mishnah. Hashoichet shebali molech ketzad omer lo. So says Rabba, this is how to understand the Mishnah. A fellow comes to us. He comes to us. Well, not to me. I'm a nudnik. But he comes to a posek. And he says, can I slaughter this chayav oaf on Yom Tif? So what do we say to him? So Beis Shammai omrim, omer lo, shachot, chafor, v'chasei. So Beis Shammai says, yeah, no problem. You have an undomesticated animal, you have a bird that you want to slaughter. Yeah, certainly. Slaughter it, and then dig up a little bit of dirt, cover, do kissui hadam, all good. Beis Hillel says, lo yishchot, elim kein, hoylo afer muchad mi ba'od yom. Whereas Beis Hillel says, no. If you didn't already prepare your dirt for the kissui hadam from before Yom Tif, don't do it. Don't do it. Rav Yosef Amar says Rav Yosef Achi Kamar. This is how to understand the Mishnah. Hashoichet shebali malech, a fellow comes to a posek and says, hey, can I slaughter this undomesticated animal or this bird on Yom Tif? Ketzad omer lo, so what do we say to him? Beis Shammai omer lo lech chafor shachot v'chasei. Says of Yosef that according to Beis Shammai, not only can you, right, he says, the difference between Rabbah and Rav Yosef is it shachot chafor v'chasei or is it chafor shachot v'chasei? Right, so Rabbah says slaughter it and then dig up some dirt and do kissui hadam. Says Rav Yosef that according to Beis Shammai, first you will dig up some dirt and then slaughter and then do kissui hadam. We'll explain the difference in a minute. Whereas Rav Yosef says, no, don't slaughter, don't do the shechita if only do the shechita if you have dirt prepared from Erev Yom Tif, otherwise don't do it. Rav Yosef, so says Abai to Rav Yosef, Lemamar v'Rabba, let's say that you, Rav Yosef and Rabba, but Reb Zera Amarav Kamaflagiso are arguing about the statement, the halacha stated by Reb Zera Amarav, which is Dam Reb Zera Amarav Hashoichet Tzarich Sheyitin Offer Lamata v'Offer Lamaila. That says Reb Zera in the name of Rab that a fellow who slaughters an undomesticated animal or a bird and has to do kissui hadam. So the way that kissui hadam works is that you take some dirt and you put it down on the floor, and then the blood goes on top of that dirt, and then you take more dirt and you cover it. So pashut, a blood sandwich, a bloody, dirty sandwich. Sounds interesting. Maybe almost like late night drunk kind of food. Bloody, dirty sandwiches. Yeah, no, probably not even that. Okay, this isn't edible, Lemaisa. You shouldn't be eating this. So anyways, says Reb Zera in the name of Rav that when you do kissui hadam, you take some of this dirt and you first put it below, and then the blood, when you slaughter the animal, goes on top of that dirt, and then you put more dirt on top of that. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'shavach es damo, that you'll spill the blood, v'chiseu be'afar, and you will cover it in dirt. Afar lo nemar, doesn't say v'chiseu afar, that you'll cover it with dirt, ela be'afar, in the dirt. Which means that when somebody slaughters an undomesticated animal or a bird and he needs to do kissui hadam, you have dirt below and dirt above and blood in the middle. So Demar Islay de Reb Zera. So let's say that you, Rav Yosef, hold of Reb Zera's opinion that you need dirt below and dirt above, and therefore Rav Yosef, you're saying lech chafor shachot v'chasei, right? Go and first, right, that according to Beis Shammai, this fellow is asking, can I slaughter this undomesticated animal or this bird on Yom Tiv? Beis Shammai says, yeah, no problem. And Rabbi Yosef says what they're saying is, go, dig up some of the dirt, slaughter the animal or the bird, and then do kissui hadam. Because you hold of Reb Zera that you need the dirt below and above. V'Rabba leisle to Reb Zera. And Rabba doesn't hold of Reb Zera. And therefore he says, shachot chafor v'chasei. First slaughter the animal, the blood will just fall on the floor, it doesn't have to fall in the dirt. And then dig up the dirt, and then do kissui hadam. Because you don't need the blood, you don't need the dirt below as well, according to Reb Zera. According to Rabba. Omle ben ledidi ben l'Rabba, Island Reb Zera, to which Rav Yosef responds, no. Both I and Rabba do hold of Reb Zera. That in order to do kissui hadam, you do need dirt below and dirt above. This is what we are arguing about. Rabba Savar I'ika offer lamata in ilo lo. That Rabba, what he's saying is that this fellow is asking, hey, can I slaughter this undomesticated animal or this bird on Yom Tif? And what Rabba is saying, shachot chafor v'chasei, slaughter and then dig up the dirt and then do kissui hadam. What he's saying is, and Rav Yosef is saying that both Rabba and Rav Yosef, both he and Rabba agree, like Reb Zera, that you have to have dirt below. And what Rabba is saying is that if you have already prepared dirt from before Yom Tif for the kissui hadam, for the layer of dirt below, well then, shachot chafor v'chasei, slaughter the animal, and then you could dig up, and then, the blood will go on top of the dirt that's already been prepared, and then you could dig up more dirt and put it on top. But if you don't have dirt prepared already from before Yom Tiv for the lower layer of dirt, well then don't dig it up first. Chayshin and Dilma mamlich v'lo shachit. Because we're concerned, what happens if he changes his mind and doesn't end up slaughtering the animal? Well, then you ended up digging the dirt for no reason, which is a problem. Uledidi, but says Rav Yosef, I say that first you could, if you don't have that first layer of dirt prepared already, you could dig it up beforehand, even though you run the risk of changing your mind and then digging up for no reason, because ha'adifa Well, this is better because if you don't allow him to dig up the dirt first for the lower layer of dirt, well then, if you didn't prepare in advance, he's not going to be able to slaughter and enjoy his Yom Tif with this animal meat. So therefore, in order to allow people to have Simchas Yom Tif, we say, look, you can dig up the lower layer of dirt and then slaughter the animal. The blood goes on top, then put more dirt above that. And even though, yes, I do acknowledge that you run the risk of changing your mind and then you dug up the dirt for no reason, but better this way, which will, to enable people to have Simchas Yom Tif. Friends, that was Daf Zayin, Masechta Beitzah. Friends, another complex daf over here, Masechta Beitzah. So what do we learn over here? So the first part of the daf continued from our discussion from yesterday, which is that we're saying that an egg that has been laid is now complete, and we say that the difference is that once it's complete, it can now turn into a chick. And there's differences in terms of if you buy it, if you intend to buy a laid egg, but they sold you an egg that came from a slaughtered chicken, so you can get your money back. We had that case, as well as a case where a fellow was looking for fertilized eggs and he was sold unfertilized eggs. In these cases, it's considered mekach ta'us, a mistaken purchase, and he can get his money back. We saw two other ways to understand this thing about the egg being laid and then it becoming complete. Another way, right? The second way to understand it is that what it means is that even once it comes out of the chicken, a majority of the way, it's already considered to be completely complete, and therefore, even if it goes back into the chicken, it's already considered laid, however, and therefore, if it went out a majority of the way on Erev Yom Tif, so even though it went back in the chicken, if it then gets laid that night on Yom Tif, you can eat it because it was a majority of the way already from before Yom Tif. And then there's a third way to understand it, which is the opposite, which is that, right, because that was Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, the majority of the way thing. But Rav says that actually, right, this is Rav, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, that only once it's laid it becomes complete. Davka, the opposite of Rabbi Yochanan, that no, it needs to be actually laid in order to be considered complete. But if it was majority of the way and then goes back inside, it would not be considered complete. Fine. Then we went back to analyze this Beitzah that we had learned the other day, which is that an egg, if you slaughter a chicken and find inside of it eggs, so then those eggs, if they're complete, they can be eaten with milk. Rabbi Yaakov had then said that no, if they are still connected, attached to connective tissue, so then they're considered part of the meat of the bird, and you cannot eat it with milk. Now, we then brought another Beitzah, which says that when it comes to nivlas of tahor, that the eating the carcass of a unslaughtered tahor bird, like a chicken or something like that. So we say that if you, the Beitzah says that if you eat these eggs that are still attached to connective tissue, so then you are going to be tahor, that it's not considered part of the meat. So if Yosef wanted to say, well, then clearly that's not like Rabbi Yaakov, because Rabbi Yaakov said that if it's still connected to connective tissue, so then it would be considered part of the meat, and you're not allowed to eat it with milk. To which Abaye responds that, well, maybe there's a distinction we can make, that maybe when it comes to Isser V'Heter, we're stringent and we say that you're not allowed to eat it with milk, but maybe when it comes to Tumah, we don't want to just make more and more things Tumah, because it can come back to bite us in terms of saying things that are Tumah that really aren't. So therefore we'll say that you're still going to be Tahor if you eat these eggs. There's another way to understand it, which is that Rav Yosef wanted to understand that a different part of the Beitzah, this Eshkol Shel Beitzim, is referring to these eggs that are still connected to the, attached to the connective tissue. And he says, and over there we say they're going to be Tameh. So we say that must be Reb Yaakov, who says that it's still considered part of the meat of the bird, to which Abaye says, well, maybe that's not actually referring to eggs. Maybe this Eshkol is talking about the ovaries themselves, which are just meat, regular meat, and that's why it is going to be Tameh. And we got into this interesting discussion about about different kinds of eggs, right? Fertilized eggs, unfertilized eggs. And we say that when it comes to fertilized eggs will always be laid during the day. That is a fact. And therefore, if there's a rooster around, the eggs will necessarily be fertilized. And therefore, we know that they're only born during the day and not at night, to the extent that even if you check the nest before Yom Tov starts and there are no eggs, for sure, and then you wake up before daylight and all of a sudden there's an egg in the nest, you can assume that it actually went out of the chicken a majority of the way before Yom Tov and then went right back in, just like Rabbi Yochanan. It's considered as if it was laid before Yom Tov, and you can eat it. Now, this is not the case when it comes to an unfertilized egg. An unfertilized egg can even be laid at night, and therefore, if you check the nest before Yom Tov and there's no egg, and then before daylight you find an egg there, you can assume that it was laid at night if there's no rooster around. We talked about how far away the rooster has to be, and if there's a river, if it can cross the river. It depends on a few factors over there. We then got into the machlokas discussed in our Mishnah between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about when it comes to hametz and when it comes to seor, to leaven. So when it comes to hametz, so let's say this: Beis Shammai says when it comes to leaven, the amount is a kissui, that's a problem on Pesach. When it comes to hametz, it's a kosevis, which is a larger amount, a more lenient amount. Whereas Beis Hillel says that both hametz and leaven, the amount is a kissui. So we said that at the end of the day, when it comes to eating hametz or seor, everyone agrees that we're talking about a kissui. Where the machlokas is when it comes to if you find it, do you have to burn it? So Beis Shammai says that we're more lenient when it comes to chametz, that if you find up to a date's worth of chametz, once it's a date's worth, you have to burn it. Whereas Beis Hillel says when it comes to chametz, even a kissui you would have to burn. But everyone agrees when it comes to leaven, you'd have to burn a kissui. Then we went further in our Mishnah to discuss the kissui hadam sugya, the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about can you slaughter a undomesticated animal or a bird on Yom Tov where you didn't yet prepare the dirt from before Yom Tov? And we explained we saw machlokas between Rabbah and Rav Yosef about how to understand this machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And they say, both Rabbah and Rav Yosef say that we're talking about a situation where a fellow is coming to ask us a shaila. He says, look, I didn't prepare, so he says, look, I have this undomesticated animal or bird that I want to slaughter on Yom Tov. Can I slaughter it? So Rabbah says, look, it depends. So we say that both Rabbah and Rav Yosef hold of Reb Zeir in the name of Rav, which is that when it comes to kissui hadam, you have to have dirt below and dirt above, and then you basically have dirt below, the blood goes on top of that, and then you cover that with more dirt. So both Rabbah and Rav Yosef agree to that. Now, they also both agree that according to Beis Hillel, when this person asks, can I slaughter these animals, the undomesticated animal or the bird, we're going to say, look, if you didn't prepare any dirt, so then forget it. So that's according to Beis Hillel. Now, according to Beis Shammai, Rabbah says, look, if you already prepared dirt to put underneath the blood, so then you can slaughter the animal, and then you can dig up more dirt in order to cover the rest of the blood. That's what Beis Shammai would say according to Rabbah. But if you don't have dirt prepared for the lower layer of dirt, well then don't slaughter, because what happens if you dig up the lower layer of dirt and then you change your mind and you don't want to have this animal, then you dug it up for no reason. Rav Yosef says you can, even if you didn't prepare the lower layer of dirt, you can dig up dirt for the lower layer of dirt, and we're not concerned about what if you change your mind, because better that you should take that risk and enable Simchas Yom Tov to have meat than to say that you're not allowed to slaughter because we're concerned that maybe he'll change his mind. And therefore, says Rav Yosef, even if you didn't prepare that lower layer of dirt, you could still slaughter the undomesticated animal or the bird and just dig up the lower layer of dirt first. Friends, that was daf Zayin of Masechta Beitzah, another complex, big daf over here at Masechta Beitzah. Hope you have a great day. Bye.